Hi, Nan. So here's what we're kind of looking at for the points that I mentioned on the recording, or on the email to put in the recording. So first one was just looking at the different kinds of slurs that we can do is when we're doing things across strings. So if we had A, G, F, am I going? It's a little bit harder to control than if I go. That makes sense. In general, it's doable, but particularly if you're on like an E string with it, and there's a lot of times you get a squeak there, so anytime you can keep the slurs on the same string, so much the better. The other place we're looking at is different kinds of eighth notes, dotted eighth notes, swingy eighth notes, and straight eighths. So completely straight eighths, don't mind my dog, versus swing eighths, where it's just a little bit more bounce to it, and dotted eighths. And trying to figure out how to keep those from becoming staccato, where there's actually like kind of a pause there. I mean, that's not full-on staccato, but we want to make sure in like our polkas and things, it's different than to have that sort of dead space between notes. Just makes it a little bit less forward driving. So again, kind of a little bit more swung, and which you definitely hear in your schottisches. And where I can feel this is in it's going, but not, there's no dead space in between them. Versus, so that's just kind of the difference that we're looking for. You feel that full dotted eighths going on in your schottisches. The polka is just a little bit more, it's a real percussive sort of swing in your polkas. Versus getting, where you end up with that little space in between. What else did I put on my list here? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Zipping back here a little bit, looking at double ups. If we go, let's see. Trying to use that instead of the slur. If I have that double up, again, it's that dead space between notes, because there's no way to do a double up that doesn't have a stop. That's what makes it a double up. There are places where I use that, kind of, and that's because it's in a swing tune. And it's got that syncopated feel, which is what a double up in general will kind of create for you. But you want to avoid that if you're not trying to play a swing tune or a syncopated moment of melody. You want to find a place where you can utilize two note slurs instead of up, stop, up. Looking at using the doorway. Here I am using a chair, but same principle of if I put my elbow on this part of my arm, so to this side of the joint, not down here. If I put it back here, I'm sort of in my fiddle shape, and then I back myself up to that, I can move everything from my elbow and my wrist but if I start moving from my shoulder, I'm just going to be banging up back and forth against this. There shouldn't be any back and forth motion from the shoulder. It might go up or down. To raise and lower in order to hit different strings, but the back of my elbow there never leaves the chair or the wall, as the case may be. And that forces you to get a lot more wrist motion, and that wrist motion makes all those little swingy notes and dotted eighths. It gives them, it's a lot easier to bow them from there, and you get better diction and better emphasis out of it. Waltz emphasis, regardless of what waltz you're going to do it in, you're looking for, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So the 1 is the most important, 2 is a quieter beat, 3, towards the back half of it, there's this little emphasis to lead the dancers to step on 1. So using like Tennessee Waltz as an example. Particularly when people have that swingy version where you go and hit that A as the longer note instead of the F sharp being longer, there's a tendency to want to emphasize there. But that's going to be beat 2, and you want to kind of keep your emphasis on 1. Even if you have that da-da dotted rhythm there, you want the F to be the emphasis. Looking at other waltzes, just so you can kind of hear that in context. It's always 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 to get that oomph in there. Then tone, something to kind of play around with. Is this just correlates with drag, basically, is because of the way bowed sound works. Essentially, you've got the string at rest, and the stickiness of the rosin and the drag of the hair pulls the string away from its resting point until the spring back towards its resting spot is greater, until that force is greater. And so you've got this catch and release thing going on over and over. Bow pulls it this way, string leaps back. And so when we have too much drag, the bow's not letting go of the string, and that's when we get kind of growly sounds. But the opposite can be true too. If there's not enough drag, it's not catching and releasing in this consistent cycle, and then we can get these kind of whistly notes. Or just not very rich sound. And so it's kind of about playing those extremes. It's to purposefully find what is too much drag and what's not enough drag, and sort of ease that into what is that middle place, and to realize that that's different from the speed of the bow. It's just the kind of contact you have, and see if you can kind of feel out from your hand. It'll be over here in your index finger where you feel the push back from the string. And just see where you can find the richest tone through finding what the appropriate level of drag against the string is. This dovetails a little bit with dynamics, is that there's that requisite amount of drag that you have to have for good tone, but the speed of the bow is what actually determines the volume. So if you're going through and doing, that's my pace, I'm not changing the tempo, but if I use more bow in the same amount of time, I get more volume. So the trick is to always use like as little bow as possible, and then kind of add to that additional weight where you need it, additional speed to get more volume. So if I start off small, when I'm emphasizing individual notes, a lot of times that's from my hand, giving this little squeeze here. If I want one note out of that phrase to be louder than the others, to have that diction there. But if I'm looking for a whole phrase of notes that's louder, or a whole phrase of notes that's quieter, that's about how much bow I'm using. So if I do, so just realizing that bow speed is not the same as the tempo. How frequently you change direction is a reflection of the tempo or the rhythm of the notes, but how fast the bow is moving, just how much distance you cover on the hair per second, that's going to affect volume. And particularly on things like your waltzes and the air, very much so. That's where all the kind of meat of it is these big crescendos and then these little quiet places. And so you can practice that by just playing a single note or playing a scale and just moving as small as you can while still getting good tone, and then move, larger and larger, faster and faster at the same tempo. Sometimes a metronome is helpful because it's showing you the beat's always here, but sometimes that bow stroke's this long and sometimes it's this long, and that's what changes the volume and gives you those big kind of dramatic swells within it. The final thing is just pitch. So something you can do for this is to put on a drone. And I just realized my drone's on my phone, so I can't record and do this at the same time. But to just have it hold the root of the tune and very slowly play scales or a tune, but I'd recommend starting with scales. And you can just bend those notes up and down, back and forth, not keeping them strictly in rhythm, but just listening to whether or not they agree with the drone notes. So I'm going to do it with, let's see if we can do it with the drone here. So to give it a drone, I'm just going to drop my G string to a D. Not at all recommending you do this, it's a pain in the neck, but you can use an actual drone on your tuner or what have you and do things like this. And you can hear that here they're kind of sick sounding, but here it sounds better. You can hear with all of those, I'm not hitting them all individually in time. I'm bending them around until the sound waves of those two notes agree with one another. So, and I did it all on one string just so I could use that low string as a drone throughout, but if you're using a digital drone, you can just go through and play it as a normal scale. You don't have to do the craziness I did there. So I hope that helps, and I will upload this and we'll see if hopefully that kind of gets you moving in the direction that you want. And let me know what February looks like. Okay, we'll see ya. Bye.